Welcome back, everyone. It's time for another quick dose of anime recap. We're back with more Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Episodes 8 to 14 are packed with feels, fights, and one very creepy smile. Let's get into it. Outside the Laboratory 5, Alphonse is suddenly attacked by someone in a suit of armor, calling himself Number 66. Meanwhile, inside, Edward stumbles upon a large hall with a large blood-stained 5-point transmutation circle on the floor. He wonders aloud if this array was used to create Philosopher's Stones. He is answered by Number 48, who emerges from the shadows and declares that he is under orders to eliminate anyone who enter the Lab 5 without any permission. Ed prepares himself for a fight by transmuting the outer plating on his automatic arm into a blade, and Number 48, impressed with the boy's alchemical skill, attacks him with his sword. But Edward defends himself cleverly. When he manages to land a blow on his armor-clad opponent, he recognizes that Number 48 gives off a familiarly hollow pitch when struck, and asks to the armored guard if he is actually empty inside, responding to him again. As Ed mentioned that he fights frequently with someone of a similar constitution. Number 48 reintroduces himself as a former death row inmate, the infamous serial killer known as Slicer. After a while, Edward begins a new inquiry, asks Slicer if he has blood connecting his disembodied soul to the armor, and if he knows whether other inmates were used as Philosopher's Stone ingredients. Number 48 answers that he doesn't know very much about the Philosopher's Stone. Lieutenant Colonel Hughes calls on the phone Colonel Mustang from Central Command to ask about the progress with the Scar case, and the Colonel Mustang informs him that their search is still incomplete. The rumor around East City is that the man must have died after receiving the news. Hearing this, Maze considers lifting the Elric brothers' escorts from duty. Ed and Al both continue their fight when Ed's new automatic arm breaks down again. However, Ed and Al manage to defeat the Slicer brothers, and when the Elder One tries to say everything he knows about the Philosopher's Stone, he's attacked by lust and envy. After that, Ed also gets a blow, and then lust and envy destroy the lab to prevent Fullmetal from returning and discovering anything. At the end in Central Prison, Kimberly recognizes the sound of high explosives destroying a building and becomes happy, thinking about the Civil War. Edward wakes up in the hospital bed, covered in bandages and in great pain. He complains angrily that the truth of which Marco had spoken was so close, and laments that this is not the time for him to be in a hospital bed. But he calms himself down immediately when Ross slaps him and scolds him for rushing off alone without trusting them. Then, he apologizes to his bodyguards and then pays his attention to another problem. When he realizes he has to call Winry to come up to Central City and fix his automatic arm once again after hearing that she is surprisingly pleasant, but that is because she left out a screw, which is probably the reason his arm failed, and leaves immediately for the capital. When she gets there, she is met by Major Armstrong, taken to the hospital. Meanwhile, Alphonse is struggling to process the information that Barry, Number 66, planted in his mind. That is Alphonse real, or has he been created as a puppet for Edward? Winery comes to the hospital and apologizes to Edward after seeing just how injured he is for not doing a perfect job in building his arm. After she performs the necessary repairs, Lieutenant Colonel Hughes visits Edward and reveals that his bodyguards will be relieved soon, and this makes Edward happy. The next morning, when Winry and Hughes return to the hospital room, Alphonse was exploding with suspicious fury. He confronts Edward about the truth regarding his body. After that, Edward leaves the place in sob after witnessing all of this. Winery scolds Alphonse for what he did because Ed has hidden in his heart the guilt of entrapping his little brother in an unknowing metal body, and his fear is that Alphonse will hate him for what he did. She commands Al to go after Ed and apologize. Then he goes after Edward to apologize and comes to an understanding to stay together to return their bodies to normal, and remark that they will need a lot more strength for the challenges to come. At the end, far away in the east, Scar dreams of Ishval as he is greeted by a young Ishvalan boy and an old man who revealed to him that they found him badly injured. At the beginning, the Colonel Mustang reminds about the Ishval Civil War. In the hospital, Edward Alphonse Hughes and Major Armstrong are having a discussion about the events that took place inside Laboratory 5, but they all lament the fact that further investigation is made difficult by the facility's mysterious destruction. When Hughes and Armstrong make plans to work their connections in order to find out more, they are all shocked by a sudden visit from the Fuhrer King Bradley, who informs them that he is well aware of their recent actions and their search for the Philosopher's Stone. After the king leaves, Winry returns to the room with train tickets to Dublin that Edward had asked her to get in. Edward and Alphonse reveal that they are headed there to see their alchemy teacher. On the train out of Central, Edward explains to Winry that they hope their learning can help them become stronger in both body and mind, as well as ask their teacher about the Philosopher's Stone. In the evening, Hughes looks into the news regarding recent Lidoist riots in Lior and remarks on all the riots and battles that are happening around the country. Suddenly, he gets struck with a strange realization and rushes to the record room and confirms worst suspicions. But before he informs the Fuhrer, he is accosted by Lust and recognizes, and he is attacked simultaneously and injured by Lust's bladed fingernails. Even though he is bleeding, Hughes makes his way to the military phones to contact the Fuhrer, but he reconsiders and exits the compound to use an external phone booth. Then he tries to reach Colonel Mustang, telling the military operator that the military is in great danger. But he is stopped by Envy, who is disguised as Second Lieutenant Ross, but Hughes realizes that he is an imposter. After a while, Hughes is shot brutally and bleeds to death in the phone booth. On the train, Winry shares an apple pie that Mrs. Hughes had baked for them, and the Elrics reminds of how much help Hughes has been to them, and resolve to thank him upon their return to the capital. At the end, Hughes' funeral is held, and the attendees, including Colonel Mustang Major Armstrong and the Fuhrer King Bradley, are grieving their friend's loss, as well as young Alicia's inability to bear her loving father's death. On the way to Dublin, Edward, Alphonse, and Winery arrive in Rush Valley, a town full of automatic engineers. As they were walking through the town, numerous onlookers are impressed by Edward's automatic parts, but he manages to drive them all away. Suddenly, he realizes that his state alchemist's pocket watch has been stolen. Hearing from some locals that it was likely done by the notorious town pickpocket, Panina, who can usually be found out in the mountains, at the home of an automatic engineer named Dominic. The gang heads into the mountains just outside of Rush Valley to search for the thief. Spotting her with the watch, the boys chased her down and caught her with the help of alchemy. Then she reveals that her legs are not only both automatic, but also each conceal a dangerous weapon which she uses to escape. Panina takes the three to look at the old home where the ornery Dominic lives, and after knowing that Panini's limbs were machined by Dominic himself, Winry asks him to inspect her work on Edward's arm and leg. Dominic approves of her design, but notes that the limbs are too heavy for the young man, as he is so small for his age. Then Winry requests Dominic a position as his apprentice, but he refuses at expressing his unwillingness to take apprentices. After Winry's advice, Panina decides to return Edward's watch, and when she takes it out, Winery realizes that Ed has sealed it alchemically. However, she opens it expecting to see something Edward considers embarrassing, but instead sees a message inside the watch. After a while, Edward runs towards Winry and tells her that Satella, Dominic's daughter-in-law, has gone into labor, and then Winry helps her to deliver the baby safely. After that, Winry confesses that she broke open his watch and saw what was inside. Then Edward reveals that he hasn't even shown it to Alphonse, and it is about the day he burned down his family home so that there would be no turning back until he reaches his goal. Hearing this, Winry begins to cry. Ed suggests that she head back to hometown, but Winry refuses it and promises to improve her engineering skills so that she can help Edward reach his goal as soon as possible. Edward and Alphonse arrive in Douglas, to the home of their alchemy teacher, Izumi Curtis, and her husband Sig. Izumi is angry at Edward for becoming a state alchemist, but welcomes them anyway. Izumi mentions meeting a man named Hollenheim, which upsets Edward. Izumi mentions meeting a man named Hollenheim, which upsets Edward. He remembers the day when that man had abandoned them as children and left their mother to struggle and die on her own, and refuses to accept any help from him. Izumi reveals that Hohenheim had mentioned that his lifelong dream in connection to the stone was about to succeed. Later that night, Edward recalls how he and his brother met Izumi years ago, when she returned to their hometown and saved the villagers from a flood with her alchemy, and recalls how they asked to become her pupils. Though she refused them at first after hearing that the Elric brothers were orphans, Izumi agreed to give them a test to see whether they were worthy to be her pupils. The test was to survive alone and without the use of alchemy for 1 whole month, and by the end of the month they would have to tell her the true meaning behind the phrase, "One is all is one." Though they struggled to survive in the island, they gradually learned and understood. When Izumi finally returned at the end of the month, the boys gave their answer to her and were accepted as her pupils. For the next 6 months, Izumi trained them in alchemical theory and martial arts. The next day, Ed asks Izumi about her ability to transmute without a circle, and she tells the brothers about her own failed attempt at human transmutation and holds them to comfort their pain. Despite her understanding, Izumi expels Edward and Alphonse as her pupils for their going against her teachings, but they return to ask for her help as their goal is to find a way to get their bodies back and can believe that Izumi can help them. In East City, Colonel Roy Mustang discusses his recent reassignment to Central City over a game of chess with his own mentor, Lieutenant General Grumman. Outside the city in the Ishmael and slum, Scar trains his injured body back to his former strength and is visited by his old mentor. He advises Scar to give up hatred, and then suddenly, a pair of hunters arrive to claim the price on the Ishval and Murderer's Head, having been informed about him by Yoki, and a Mysterian beggar living in the slum, due to the Elric brothers' destruction of his military career. Scar quickly dispatches the 2 hunters and departs from the slum despite his mentor's assertion. The next day, while Alphonse is sweeping outside of Izumi's house, a note appears saying that someone claims to know his secret and wants to talk. Alphonse goes to meet him and ends up in a fight with some strange-looking people. They manage to defeat him and take him back to their base. There, Alphonse meets Greed, a homunculus who has been alive for 200 years. He is interested in Alphonse's secret, as it could be the answer to immortality. The other people with Greed are chimeras, and all of them were created by the military. Alphonse does not believe it. Luckily, Edward finds his brother and picks a fight with Greed. However, Greed can make his body like a shield and has the ability to fast heal his body. Edward discovers his secret and turns the fight in his favor when Izumi comes and beats both of them down. Izumi and Edward are ready to fight with Greed, but he turns around and runs. Then Edward tries to follow him, but Izumi stops him from following. After a while, the military arrives and locks the place down. It's not just the military, but the Führer King Bradley is also leading the charge and isn't planning on taking any prisoners. Greed attempts to fight back, but Bradley cuts off his right hand. This surprises Greed, who demands to know who the Führer really is. Greed manages to knock off his eye patch, which reveals an eye with an Ouroboros symbol on it. When Creed's men arrive, they rush to help, but they are mercilessly cut down by Bradley. However, Bradley comes to Alphonse, and when Martel tries to attack him, she is cut down inside of Alphonse. King Bradley delivers Greed to a mysterious underground facility where he joins lust, gluttony, and envy. He reveals to Greed that he is very angry. Greed's father offers Greed the chance to rejoin his team, but he refuses it and is melted down and reabsorbed into his father's body. At the end, Bradley meets his family. That's it for this episode, batch. Thanks for watching Anime Recap. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the anime love. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and stay anime-zing.